I've been learning about cognitive flow. Rock climbing maybe would be a good example where you definitely know what your goal is and how you're going to get there, but the very next step is challenging enough and you have to like figure it out, but then it's right on top of the next step. You can't stop to rest because you have to get to the next step, and you have the motivation. So I think it's very similar to rock climbing in that, what it means to have the constant feedback. It's also self-forgetful. You might kind of feel like you don't exist and you don't think about yourself because you're so engaged and absorbed in the activity. So you forget that you're doing school, you forget that, you forget to complain, forget to have behavior issues, because you're so absorbed. You're not wondering what to do next and waiting for someone to tell you. Some activities where I experience flow as an adult include cooking breakfast, making coffee, jogging, walking, biking, swimming laps, any kind of exercise that's by myself. They haven't this thing in common. I think they are routine. They all are by myself. And they're all physically rewarding but mentally restful. I know that I'm doing one of these activities if I'm able to listen to a podcast or an audiobook or music with lyrics while I do it. If I can't handle that extra stimulus, then I'm probably not experiencing flow. Then on the other side, there's other kinds of flow that I experience as an adult that are more mentally involved, but they're still familiar. Reflecting on my day in my journal, I just do bullet points at the end of the day, not in order, just whatever comes to my mind. In whatever order it comes into my mind, I'll write it down in bullet point form, not complete sentences, just writing it down. And I experience flow then. Now, these are the kinds of activities that I can't listen to music with lyrics while I do them, but kind of instrumental spa music is ideal. And I might know that I'm experiencing flow if, that music is helping me stay focused and be in flow. All of these things, one thing that they have in common is that I only experience flow doing these things sometimes. The circumstances have to be just right. Maybe I've passed a certain point. I've been doing it, I might not experience flow until I've been doing it for 30 minutes at least or something. It might be with certain people or at certain times of day, or I'm mentally prepared to do the activity in some way so that I can focus and block out all of the other distractions. Now, on the subject of play and game-based learning, I was homeschooled as a child, and I have very vivid memories of my childhood. I was a reader, I was a thinker, and my theory is that it was also because I was a girl. I loved pretending and creating just elaborate, organized worlds that I can, just on my own, and sometimes they involved some kind of thing out of construction paper that was, my symbolic little person, or sometimes it involved actual toys that I had, whatever. I don't know if I was more imaginative than most kids, or if I was just more willing to share my little thoughts and narratives with adults or other kids, or if that stage was just allowed to last longer because of my educational and my social environment, so that it was more noticeable, because it definitely lasted a long time. I was still doing this up till I was 13 or 14 years old in different forms. One story to kind of illustrate, I remember being 9 or so, and I was eating a broccoli, and I said, kind of to whoever was in the room, what if, imagine you were a little person and you could sit in the branch of the broccoli in the little tree. And my friend's mom, who I was at her house, she was also a homeschooling mom, and she heard me, and she kind of just pondered what I had said, and she said something kind of profound to me, like, you have a very fertile imagination and it's a gift, or something to that effect. And then she went and printed out an article for me about the imagination. Maybe it was by like a pastor or an author or someone adult and deep. And I just devoured it. I thought it was kind of weird that she would say something like that and make a point of it like she did. But I realized at that moment that there were adults who thought that my imagination was something to be respected and guarded and cultivated. It wasn't just something that was cute. And I think that shaped how willing I was to use my imagination for so much longer, maybe, than many kids do. One of the sources that I looked at was the website for the Institute of Play. I began to understand game-like learning and the principles of it better when I saw a science class at one of the schools that they highlight and use as a model. They were using their imaginations, pretending to be characters in a story. There was this doctor, Dr. Smalls, who was trapped inside of one of his patient's bodies. They had to like locate Dr. Smalls and get him out of his patient's body because he had been like shrunken himself to get in there and find out this patient's disease or something. The teacher said that, you know, they were learning all of these things about the human body in trying to locate Dr. Smalls. So that was how the activity or the game met standards. And some of the kids, she said, were not really that willing to suspend logic and go with it. They couldn't get past the fact that it was not real. But other kids, you know, didn't, and they all knew it was made up and pretend. But it made me think of something that I did as a kid with math. I hated math like so much. There was a season in my life where the only way that I could get through math, again, I was homeschooled, so it was like independent work, was to take my textbook and my notebook and my tools and go up to the most empty room of the house, close the door, and pretend that I was a person in the Holocaust. I couldn't leave the room because it was like a hiding place sort of a situation. And I had schoolwork to do during that time, and I had to do it, and I couldn't like leave, and I had to be quiet, and so no one would find me. And I got my math done like so much faster and more efficiently than I had ever been able to do just doing work. I think I learned something that I can use with my students. I naturally eventually figured out as a kid that this helped me get stuff done. But if we as teachers can figure out how to facilitate that for students who may not get to that point on their own, I think that was one principle that I saw working in the Institute of Play. I also listened to a Cult of Pedagogy podcast. I love those, on the Global Day of Play idea.
One reason for the decline of play has been the spread of what I call a schoolish view of child development. The view that children learn best, everything, from adults. That children's own self-directed activities with other children are wastes of time. We don't often say it that way, but that's the implicit understanding that underlies so much of our policy with regard to children. So childhood has turned from a time of freedom to a time of resume building.
Why do we have school? When the kids can learn things on YouTube and on the internet, why do we even have school? It's to introduce kids to new concepts, things that they wouldn't naturally do on their own. Mm-hmm. And believe it or not, in this day and age, kids do not just play on their own. Everything's structured for them. They have soccer practice, which there's nothing wrong with any of these things. Mm-hmm. Soccer practice, they're on their devices, they go to dance, they go to church, they do all these different things in their lives, but it's all told, everything's told to them. It's scripted out for them of what they're exactly supposed to do.
Basically, they're saying that kids today don't play naturally. And so it's almost like give them the freedom, but also give them the tools to relearn how to play when so many of them have lost that natural tendency